The gospel lesson today is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, verses 1 through 10. You might recognize this passage. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a thief, tax collector, and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. And so he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. And when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." And so he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He is gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." This is the reading of the word of our Lord.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated. I can't get the song out of my head, you know, with the kids all saying, "Zacchaeus, you come down." This story is entitled "The Day Shay Got to Play," and it's by E.J. Nolan. Chush is a school in Brooklyn, New York that caters to learning disabled children. Some children remain in Chush for their entire school career. At a Chush fundraising dinner, the father of one student delivered a speech that would never be forgotten by all who attended. After extolling the school and its dedicated staff, he cried out, "Where is the perfection in my son Shay? Everything God does is done with perfection. But my child cannot understand things as other children do. My child cannot remember facts and figures as other children do. Where is God's perfection?" The audience was shocked by the question and pained by the father's anguish. "I believe," the father answered, "that when God brings a child like this into the world, the perfection that he seeks is in the way people react to the child." He then told the following story about his son, Shay. One afternoon, Shay and his father walked past a park where some boys Shay knew were playing baseball. Shay asked, "Do you think they will let me play?" Now, Shay's father knew that his son was not at all athletic and that most boys would not want him on their team. But Shay's father understood that if his son was chosen to play, it would give him a comfortable sense of belonging. Shay's father approached one of the boys in the field and asked if Shay could play. The boy looked around for guidance from his teammates, and getting none, he took matters into his own hands and said, "Well, we're losing by 6 runs, and the game is in the 8th inning. I guess he can be on our team, and we'll put him up to bat in the 9th inning." Shay's father was ecstatic as Shay smiled broadly. Shay was told to put on a glove and go out to play short center field. In the bottom of the 8th inning, Shay's team scored a few runs, but was still behind by 3. In the bottom of the ninth inning, Shea's team scored again, now with 2 outs, and the bases loaded with the potential winning run on base. Shea was scheduled to bat. Would the team actually let Shea bat at this juncture and give away their chance to win the game? Surprisingly, Shea was given the bat. Everyone knew that it was all but impossible because Shea didn't even know how to hold the bat properly, let alone hit with it. However, as Shea stepped up to the plate, the pitcher moved a few steps closer to him and lobbed the ball softly into Shea so that at least he'd have a chance of making some kind of contact. Well, the first pitch came, and Shea swung clumsily and missed. One of Shea's teammates came up to Shea, and together they held the bat and faced the pitcher, waiting for the next pitch. The pitcher took a few more steps closer to Shea and tossed the ball softly towards him. As the pitch came in, Shea and his teammates swung at the ball, and together they hit a slow ground ball to the pitcher. The pitcher picked up the soft grounder and could easily have thrown the ball to the first baseman. Shea would have been out, and that would have ended the game. And instead, the pitcher took the ball, threw it on a high arc to right field, far beyond the reach of the first baseman. Everyone started yelling, "Shea! Run to first! Run to first!" And never in his life had Shea run to first. He scampered down the baseline, wide-eyed and startled. And by the time he reached first base, the right fielder had the ball. He could have thrown the ball to the second baseman, who would tag out Shea, who was still running. But the right fielder understood what the pitcher's intentions were, and so he threw the ball high and far over the third baseman's head. Everyone yelled, "Run to second! Run to second!" Shea ran towards second base as the runners ahead of him deliriously circled the bases towards home. As Shea reached second base, the opposing shortstop ran to him, turned him in the direction of third base, and shouted, "Run to third!" As Shea rounded third base, the boys from both teams ran behind him, screaming, "Shea, run home!" And Shea ran home. He stepped on home plate, and all 18 boys lifted him on their shoulders and made him the hero, as he had just hit a grand slam and won the game for his team. "That day," said the father softly, with tears now rolling down his face, those 18 boys reached their level of God's perfection. Each of us are responsible for accomplishing a piece of God's divine plan. Did you know that? It's described in a number of different ways in the scriptures, how each of us has a part to play in God's plan. One of the ways that it's described is that when we're in church, we're all different pieces of the body, right? Hands, feet, arms, I always figured I was the navel or something like that. I mean, what good is a belly button, really? We all have some part. We are put here for a purpose, and we're all a part of God's divine plan. And it's true both as a church and as individuals. As a church, we are responsible for accomplishing a piece of the divine plan. As individuals, we're responsible for accomplishing a piece of the divine plan. The closer to God you get, the more you feel Him tugging at your heartstrings, and the more you begin to understand your role. There's a lady, young by my standards, I don't know, she probably is pushing 40 years old now. That's really old, isn't it? At my former church in Grant, and she said, she sent me an email and said, I'm supposed to be doing something, I can't give you her exact words, but basically what she was saying to me is God was tugging on her heartstrings to do something. And she thought maybe she should be a Sunday school teacher. And then she thought maybe, and she had all these different things. She didn't know what she was supposed to do, but she knew she was supposed to do something. She is a leader anyway, and she is capable of leading people, and she's also a bit of a visionary. And in the end, among other things that she chose to do, she got this idea for an egg drop. And so last Sunday, or not last Sunday, but for Easter, and it was one of the first Saturdays in April, I think, maybe it was the first Saturday. They were supposed to have a helicopter, and they were supposed to drop all these eggs, and the whole congregation came together and stuffed 3,000 plastic eggs with, I don't know what they put in them, jelly beans. There was a note inviting them to church in there as well. And then when the day came, the weather was too bad for the helicopter. So they put up a ladder from the fire department, and they dropped them from the ladder. But at any rate, there was a huge crowd there at the church as a result of her efforts of publicity, of organization, all those things. Sometimes we have this sense that God's tugging at our heartstrings, and when we do, we need to do what Christy did, and that is, where is God leading me? What am I supposed to be doing? Because we all have a part in the divine plan. Zacchaeus accomplished a piece of the divine plan, even as a sinner, even as a tax collector. Now, people really hated him a lot. They hated him because he was a Jew that worked for Rome. So he was a traitor, see? He was considered a traitor because his job, his employment came from Rome, and he was fleecing all the people around him, collecting taxes for the emperor. And he was very wealthy because, like all the tax collectors of his time, he overcharged everybody, and he kept the difference, see? So if you owed $1 to Rome, he charged you $2, and he made a big cut on the deal. So he was not liked, not even a little bit, as a tax collector. But you know what? He must have felt this tug on his heart somehow. He must have heard these stories about Jesus, and frankly, he couldn't wait to see him. Now, at the time that Zacchaeus was seeing Jesus, Jesus was a rock star, okay? He was the talk of the town. Everybody wanted to see Jesus, and Zacchaeus was no different. He fought the crowds. He climbed the tree. And then Jesus singled him out. Now, there were a lot of people in that crowd that Jesus could have singled out, but he singled out the little man in the tree. The people didn't like that because that man was a sinner. Everyone thought if Jesus was going to single out somebody, Jesus would find the most pure person in the crowd, right? Find the person that served the most. Find the person who had the greatest heart for God. Find the most pious person in the crowd. And know, who does he turn to? The evil one. Or at least in people's eyes, that's who Zacchaeus was. Singled out Zacchaeus. In many churches, we really only like people like ourselves to be here. You know? It's easier that way if people are like us, if they share our values, if they share our economic style, if they have similar educations and background, if those are the people that we relate to best, and so those are the people we'd kind of like to have with us in our church. And when people that show up that are different from that, subtly, we might just kind of exclude them. We might keep them out of the conversation a little bit. We might not sit with them. It wouldn't be a huge, big thing, but somehow they would never really feel a part. That's awful, isn't it? It makes me feel awful just to think about it. We, as a church, need to be willing to accept the people that we don't find attractive. Jesus wasn't more attracted to Zacchaeus, was he? No. That isn't why he singled out Zacchaeus. And the ball team wasn't more attracted to Shay, were they? No. That wasn't why they did what they did. Both Jesus and that ball team, they loved in spite of the differences between themselves and the people that they were loving. Now, if ever there were a congregation capable of loving and including others that are different than ourselves, I truly believe it's you. I really do. I've experienced your love. I've experienced your acceptance. And I know many, many others have as well. And because of that, because you are such a capable congregation in accepting others who are different than ourselves, we need to go one step further. Now, that's just exactly what God does to us all the time, by the way. He takes our strengths and he asks us to go one more step. The step that we wouldn't have taken if God didn't ask us to take it. We need to go one more step as a loving and inclusive congregation. We need to be invitational. Now you're asking too much, preacher. Yeah. Now you're going one step too far. We need to initiate conversations. And I got to tell you, I'm preaching to myself. I'm always preaching to myself. I'm an introvert. It's hard for me to be the first person to bring up a conversation, right? We need to initiate conversations with people that we either don't know or that aren't involved in church in any way, and certainly aren't involved in ours. We need to initiate those conversations. We need to learn something about the person, get to know them. We need to find something in common with that person, because as soon as we find something in common with them, suddenly we have something to talk about, don't we? And you know what? There is not a person on the face of this planet that we don't have something in common with. Not one. We always have something in common with another person. It can be maybe that we grew up in the same town, or maybe that we went to the same school, or maybe that we both like to go fishing, or that we both like to knit, or maybe we would find that we all both have grandkids, or that we both have lost a loved one. Any of those things is the beginning of a conversation, isn't it? Any of them. Any of them is a human connection that we would have with another person. And then we need to offer them friendship, offer them a relationship. Now, I've told you before, and I will not stop telling you, that God's highest priority, and I firmly believe this, is relationship. Yesterday, I did my friend Jim's funeral. It was hard, and I can tell you, I didn't want to do it. Most of the time, I know the people that I do a funeral for, but, when my mom died, I didn't do her funeral. I asked a friend who was a pastor to do that. I wasn't going to try to do that. And I talked about friendship. And I talked about relationships. And I talked about what God really wants from us. He wants us to be in relationship with Him. And He wants us to be in relationship with each other. And if you break all of the commandments, if you break all of the scriptures down, that's what they mean. Now, He says it this way. He says, love God and love your neighbor. And what He means by love is be in relationship with. That's what He means. When we offer another person friendship, when we offer another person relationship, we are fulfilling part of our responsibility in the divine plan. And then the last one, and this is probably the hardest piece, we give them a gift. And it's the biggest gift that we have to give. You know what that gift is? It's time. It's time. Do you know that is the biggest gift that you have to give is your time? It's also the thing that we hold on to the tightest, isn't it? Because time is so precious. When you give your grandchildren time, you've given them the greatest gift that you have to give. When you give your spouse time, you've given them the greatest gift that you have to give. When you give a friend time, you've given the greatest gift that you have to give. And it's only by giving the gift of time that we build relationships. That's true with God, and it's true with each other. If we're going to build a relationship with God, we've got to give Him some time. If we're going to build a relationship with other people, we've got to give them some time. In our story, the kids loved on Shay. And they didn't have a lot in common, but they included him anyway. They included him in a way that was actually sacrificial. And I know, I'm telling you, when we give someone our time, we are making a sacrifice. That's what God wants from us. That's what He did for us. That's what He wants from us. Sacrifice. That team acknowledged Shay's feelings. That team made Shay feel worth, self-worth. That team made Shay, just bolstered his self-image as well. And here's the amazing thing. God never does things one way, okay? He never does anything just one way. In other words, if you go with the intent of being a blessing, you know what's going to happen? You'll be blessed. It happens every time. And when it happens, it surprises you because you go with the intent of being a blessing. Imagine this team being a blessing to Shay. They were also blessed. They probably were more blessed than Shay was because that's how God works. He never works just one way. Jesus came to remove all the barriers between himself and people, all people. We're supposed to do the same thing. Remove the barriers between us and others. 1 John 4:11, if God so loves us, we ought to love one another. Pass it on. God bless.